Hi, I'm Bob Anderson here at Titletown Orthopedics, and I head up the sports foot and ankle division here at Titletown. I also serve as the co-chairman of the Musculoskeletal Committee of the NFL, and I've been a member of the Foot and Ankle Committee of the NFL for nearly 20 years. And we have concerns. We have concerns about lower extremity injuries and the role that the shoe, or the shoe with the cleat, may play on any given plane surface, whether grass or artificial. We've been doing a lot of work at the NFL level, thanks to the generosity and the support the NFL has given our committees in looking into this. But what we're concerned about is cleats in particular on artificial surfaces. We've done 2 studies now showing that there is an increased risk of lower extremity injuries, things like a high ankle sprain or an ACL injury on an artificial surface as compared to grass in NFL players. And I will emphasize, this is for the NFL. I can't just transfer this to high schools and colleges. This is the NFL. But we do have concerns about how a cleat interacts with certain surfaces in the NFL, particularly artificial surfaces. We've done a lot of testing, and we're trying to determine what cleats release at the appropriate amount of torque to hopefully dissipate energy and avoid some of the lower extremity injuries that we're seeing. So this goes back many years. The player, the athlete, wants to have a lot of friction. He wants to have a lot of traction so he can perform well on any given surface, whether it's a wet grass surface where he's going to wear a longer cleat, or on an artificial surface that may have a little bit of a glide to it where, again, he wants to have a lot of traction, a lot of friction. The problem is, though, if your cleat goes down too far into the surface that they're playing on, particularly artificial, it may not release when a certain amount of torque is applied to that lower extremity. It may grab, it may get stuck, so to say. And then if the cleat doesn't release, you could then impart injury to the lower extremity. And so that's our concern. So what we're looking for is cleats that don't grab too heavily, particularly in artificial surfaces, that they have some degree of release. It's like the adage saying, slippage. So slippage, when you see these guys slip around on the surface, whether it's grass or artificial surface, the player doesn't like it because, again, they've lost some of that ability to perform, to beat out the other guy that's the opposing player. On the other hand, from a physician standpoint, a little bit of slippage may be good because it releases energy and it doesn't let those levels of torque get to a level where lower extremity injuries may occur. So we do a lot of testing now in the NFL. We test basically how cleats interact on different surfaces to make sure they're not grabbing too much. And we have devices that we can do that simulate various maneuvers that the NFL player would have. And then all the different surfaces that are in the NFU venues, we're basically utilizing those platforms to test with. So again, we're trying to get the player into a shoe that's safe, where he's got enough to perform with, but hopefully a cleat that will release under a certain amount of torque to lower extremity injuries. And that's the cleat surface interaction. We've been talking about this for years, and now we have more and more information at hand to show that, yes, there is a concern about cleats, particularly how they interact on different artificial surfaces. We're doing a lot of work to try to learn more about this and minimize or create maybe a little bit of appropriate slippage to decrease the number of lower extremity injuries we see in the NFL. We're actually now trying to help companies develop artificial surfaces that mimic grass, because again, we know that grass has a lower incident of lower extremity injuries when it comes to things like the high ankle sprain and the ACL. But it's not just the cleat. The other thing that you got to consider is, what about the fit of the shoe on any given player's foot? So what we find is, if you're wearing too narrow of a shoe, a lot of things can happen. You can get stress fractures on the outside of the foot, so-called Jones fracture, where the foot may be hanging off the side of a narrow foot. You may get some bruising of bone prominences as well if it's too narrow fit. So we're trying to get all the players to be fitted professionally before every season to make sure that a wide enough shoe that's long enough. The other thing we want to do is we want to make sure the shoe's not too flexible. This is a great shoe. This shoe doesn't bend too much. It's not too flexible, not too lightweight. And that's important when you're trying to prevent injuries like turf toe. A turf toe injury is a sprain of the big toe. When the shoe bends and it bends too far, the ligaments underlying the big toe joint can actually rupture, and that's how you develop a turf toe, which can be quite debilitating. So by decreasing the flexibility in the front of the foot, you may reduce some of those turf toe injuries that occur on the NFL week to week. The other thing we're trying to minimize is what's called Lisfranc injuries. The Lisfranc injury is a midfoot sprain. So it's one that occurs from the midfoot, but it's actually occurred when you have too much bend in their forefoot, and the person gets up on it, twists wrong, and then gets the bad midfoot sprain or Lisfranc injury. So again, if we can modify or decrease some of the flexibility in some of the cleat plates of various shoes, we can minimize these turf toe Lisfranc injuries. So again, trying to get the right fit as far as width is concerned and length, so they're not getting toe problems, hammer toe, toenail changes, but then also making sure there's not excessive flexibility. So again, players like wearing very lightweight shoes with a lot of flexibility so they can run like the wind, so to say. And we're trying to educate them that there's a balance here. There's a balance as far as, the right amount of flexibility, the right amount of weight to a shoe, and certainly the size and the width of the shoe. So again, we're trying to get the word out that an athletic shoe, it can look nice, but it's not just apparel, it's part of your protective equipment. And it's necessary to be in the right size shoe, the right style shoe, the right cleat plate to hopefully minimize lower extremity injuries and allow a player to have a good and healthy long-term career.